Welcome, and thank you for joining us on Day 5 of this DSP Week virtual event From Praise to Promise. My name is Desiree Lauxbear from the National Alliance of Direct Support Professionals. Today we are joined by our friend and colleague, Dave Hingsburger, to look at the role of the DSP and what it means to provide direct service, both politically and emotionally, during the time of a global pandemic. Today's event is sponsored by IARF. IARF is the Illinois' largest statewide association for community-based providers serving adults and children with intellectual and developmental disabilities and mental illnesses. They are the voice of the community-based association for state and federal government. We thank IARF for their sponsorship of today's event.
Hi, I'm here to welcome you to DSP Recognition Week, although I need to recognize that's not when this is being recorded. This is being recorded at a very different time, and I don't know what's going on right now with a pandemic that we've never experienced before. I have no idea what September is going to look like for me or for you. So in the present, I want to talk to you a little bit about what the role of the DSP is and what it means, particularly to people with disabilities, but what it also means to who we are and our sense of ourselves as people who work with people with intellectual disabilities. And I'm going to go way, way, way back to the beginning of my career to tell you a story. It's one that helped me sort of frame my own work and understand what it was that I did in service to people with disabilities. I was in Victoria, British Columbia, and I wanted to move out east. And I looked in the newspaper, and there was a small ad for a position working in a community-based service in Smith Falls, Ontario. And I was very interested in that, so I called them, I sent them a resume, and we arranged a telephone interview. And for those days, that was high tech. But nonetheless, I got the job. They'd never seen me, I'd never seen them. All I knew really of the place that I was going to was that it was a community-based service. So I drove all the way across Canada, and I arrived relatively late at night. And I was very excited to be there after having driven essentially across the country. So I decided before I got myself a hotel room and before I thought of any of those things, I'm going to drive to where it is that I would be working. So I got the address out and drove and I discovered that I was going to be working in this enormous institution, just enormous institution. And as it turned out, it was one of the largest institutions in Canada. And to give you a sense of the size of this place, the main corridor was 1 kilometer long. Now, I know you Americans are congenitally unable to understand the metric system, so maybe I better say it in American to you. It was a hell of a long way. So I go to work and I asked the question. I thought this was a community-based service. And they said, and I'm quoting here, "We take them to the community." Okay, so this was in the fall. So as we get closer and closer to the Christmas holidays, I know without question that I'm going to be working Christmas Day. And the reason I knew this is this was a unionized environment, and people with seniority got the best holidays, and those of us who had none worked the worst. So, but for me, working on Christmas Day was not a bad thing, because you see, it was my very first Christmas away from home. And to have something to do that day was pretty cool. So I remember arriving for my morning shift. I pulled up and parked the car, and it was still very dark, and you could see the lights from the institution. And I got out and I walked into the institution. And I want you to know it felt different. And it had been feeling different for the last week or two as we moved up towards Christmas Day. Because you see, those people who had family were packing up and leaving to go visit with their families. Those who had people who were in their lives who are volunteers or other kinds of social connections, they were packing up to go spend Christmas with those folks. So over time, more and more people left the institution, and it started to feel a little bit empty because it was a place that was built to house probably the thousands. I have no idea what the capacity was, but it was huge. Um, and now there was only like 300 or 400 people there. And I remember going on the ward that morning and going into the nurses' station, and I noticed that there was a note that was left for me by my supervisor, whose name was Teresa. So I read the note, and I don't know if you've ever read something written about you that sort of stays with you your whole lifetime. Well, that's true in this case for me, because it said, Dave, due to your unique skills and abilities, we have chosen you to be Santa Claus today. Now, I don't know what those unique skills and abilities might have been, but I think fat had something to do with it. But I'll tell you, I've been fat my whole life, but I ain't never been Santa. And I was really excited about it. So Santa was going to arrive at noon, and at 11:30, I went into a little change area, and I got the box out, and I pulled the costume out, and I put it on, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, it was a tad tight. But nonetheless, I got it on, I put the beard on, and put the hair on, I put the hat on, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I gave myself the heartiest ho, ho, ho I could possibly do. I was totally into this, just totally into this. So I go down to the kilometer-long hallway, and I looked down at the end of the hallway where I was told to go, and I want you to know that at the end of the hallway, they had a Santa throne. You know, the ones that they have in the mall with the red crushed velvet seat and the gold arms and so forth. So I went and I sat down on that throne. And I want you to know it's the first time I ever sat on a throne that wasn't white. But nonetheless, I was there. I was happy. I was ready. But I was a little unprepared for what happened next because they brought them. All at once, they brought them. All the people who were left, all the people who didn't have places to go, all of the people left behind. They stood in this haphazard row down this kilometer-long hallway, and I want you to know, they looked for all the world. They looked like what they were. They looked like refugees. Refugees from a world that had just simply thrown them away. And I was in the chair, and there was this guy who was about 30 years old, right at the front of the line, and he's all real excited. It's Christmas and so forth, and I'm all ready. I'm in the chair, and I've got this big bag, and it's full of presents. And they didn't really buy anything. They just picked stuff up around the wards and stuff that were slightly new, a little bit bruised or whatever, and wrapped it up because they only wanted to have something to open. So that was my job. So this guy comes and he sits on my lap, and I ho, ho, ho. And then the words came out of my mouth without even thinking, because for my whole life, I've known what Santa would say. There's a Santa script that we all know. So I turned to him and I said, ho, 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 and what would you like for Christmas? Now I want you to know, I was unprepared for his answer. I was unprepared. Because you see, he took me seriously. He took me as a wish granter. He took me as a prayer receiver. So he leaned forward and he whispered in my ear. He said, Santa, I want to go home. And my heart broke. My heart just broke, and tears sprang to my eyes, and I knew that I couldn't be a Santa that was crying, so I tried to stop that as quickly as I possibly could, and I reached down and distracted myself by grabbing a present that wasn't for him, but that he could open. And I handed it to him, and I wished him a Merry Christmas that I knew he would not have. And I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. There's all these people in this lineup, and I don't want to do it anymore. But suddenly I realized that I had the opportunity to hear the deepest wishes of people who had been living their life at the margin, people who had not been part of the community, or if they had been expunged from it. So the next woman is my age now. She was dancing excited. She was looking at me and like, there's Santa and he looks real and all that. So when I waved, she just ran over and she sat on my lap, and I ho ho hoed, and then I said, and what would you like for Christmas? And once again, she took me seriously. She took me as a wish granter and a prayer receiver. And she leaned forward and she whispered into my ear, she said, Santa, I haven't seen my mom for a very long time. Could I see my mom today, please? And once again, my heart broke, and once again, there were tears in my eyes, but once again, I distracted myself by grabbing a gift that wasn't for her, but she could open, and gave it to her and wished her a Merry Christmas that she would not have. And I sat there for the longest time as the lineup slowly dwindled down to a few. And I want you to know that not everybody in the lineup took that question that seriously. There were those people who wanted specific things, but most of them didn't. Most of them asked for community, for family, for welcome. Most of them asked to be free, to experience that freedom. Most of them asked to be out of that place and into the community. All of them felt what it was like to not be welcome. All of them felt what it was like to not be people who were valued. All of them felt that. And I'll tell you, when I left there, that was my last time working in institutional care. I went to the community and spent my life working in the community from there. But every now and then at the end of my day, I asked myself a question. And that is, has what I've done today looked like answer to prayer of a disenfranchised people? And I want you to know that the higher that I've gone up in my career and the positions that I have taken, the further that I've gotten from direct support work, the more difficult that question that is to ask myself. You know, am I really doing here at this distance from the people I serve the things that I need to be doing so that people with disabilities can be freer, can feel welcomed in their home? Am I really doing that? And I think that that's something that you need to think about in terms of the work that you're doing, because you're actually working with somebody at the heart, very heart of their prayer, just to be welcomed into the community and to live in the community, and they need you for that. So it's a powerful thing that you do. And I think it's important to recognize that on an ongoing basis, not in the, oh, you're such wonderful heroes for what you do. And you are, okay, I'm not taking from that, but I'm talking about pre-pandemic rhetoric about what it is that we did and what it is that we do. Pre-pandemic, we were working on the civil liberties of people with disabilities. We were working with them to feel ownership of the communities in which they live. And that's what we did. And there's something really, really powerful in that. And you know, when you take a look of all the different things that we've done and all the different things and relationships that we've had with people with disabilities, the end result is something quite magnificent. We have built this idea of community. It's an idea that at one time did not exist. I want to tell you about one more story from the institution, and it's my very first job. And it was a different institution in Victoria, British Columbia, and I got the job, and I got the job after just the shortest interview possible. And I went to work, and I discovered that I was going to be working on the behavior ward. The behavior ward. I'm fresh out of school, and I'm going to be working on the behavior ward. And that scared me a little bit. It's the only locked ward in the place. So they gave me my keys, and I went through the door. And I immediately knew why I had been hired to work in that place, because all the people with disabilities were very regular, ordinary sized people, and all of us staff were really big people. We were people that looked like we could pick somebody up and toss them in a timeout room without any kind of struggle at all. Well, I don't want to be like that. And I had the opportunity to prove myself in that way. There was a fellow at the window, and he kept looking back at the door, and he always was looking for somebody new coming in the ward. And I was someone new. So he looked at me, and he caught my eye, and then he looked out the window and came back and caught my eye again, and he said, looking out the window and pointing, "Pokahor! Pokahor! 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 Pokahor!" And he's like really excited. And I'm really caught by his excitement. So I go over to the window with him, and he looks at me, and he's Pokahor, 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 pointing out the window. So I look out the window, and I'm trying to think, what the hell is a Pokahor? And this guy here, he clearly doesn't have the best in communication skills, because I don't understand at all what he means. And you know, he kept pointing, and it looked like he was pointing to the same area. So I wanted to get right into his space and put my head over his arm to see what it was that he was pointing to. But I'm not stupid, okay? This is a behavior ward, and I don't want to get into somebody's space in that way. But I was interested in him. There was passion in his voice. And I decided that I wanted to know what it was that he was saying. So what I did for the first little while was just simply observe. If he was at the window and he was going Pokahor, I always went over and I stood at the window with him, and he would look at me with this amazing smile and say, "Pokahor, Pokahor, Pokahor, Pokahor," and look at me with real excitement, real excitement. Well, at the end of my first or second week, I don't remember, I had to have a meeting with a psychologist. And we were to go in with two goals, one for ourselves and one for somebody on the ward. So I went in and I said, I have just one goal, and it's kind of for myself and it's kind of for somebody on the ward. And he said, "So what's your goal?" And I said, "I want to figure out Pokahor." And he just sort of rolled his eyes. He said, "You know, everybody has tried to figure out Pokahor." And I said, I know. But I'm going to take a data-based approach to Pokahor. And he said, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, what I mean is that I'm going to go over to the window when he says Pokahor, and I'm going to take a sheet and make a data sheet. What I'm going to do is write everything down that's outside that window. Because here's something interesting that I've noticed. There are non-Pokahor times. There are times when he is really engaged in an activity or something on the ward, and he pays no attention to the window at all. So I kind of figure that since Pokahor interests him so much, if he's able to do other stuff, Pokahor's probably not there. Okay, so here's the plan. 2 weeks of data. What's that? 2 weeks of data. I'm going to wait for a non-Pokahor time. and go over to the window and I check things off, and whatever's missing is probably Poco. It's a good plan. So I got my book. I got my book and I got my pen. And the first day of data taking, he's at the window and going Poco Hor. And I come and stand beside him, and he looks and he sees that I've got this book and I've got this pen and I'm writing stuff down, and that just really excites him. So he's like, "Whoa, Poco Hor, man!" You know, it's like Poco Hor. So I'm busily writing what's down. Now it's time to tell you what's outside the window. What's outside the window is a pastoral sea. You just sort of look down to a creek at the bottom of the property, and then it rose up into farmland on the other side. And there were some barns, and there were some houses, and there were some cows, and there were some horses, and there was random chickens and stuff like that. So here's the problem with one of them scenes. They don't change very much. You know, so I'm being very detailed in what I'm writing down, like horses times 2, cows times 3. I'm getting it all down. And I do that for 2 solid weeks. I have just a ream of data. Now I'm coming back to work. And I'll tell you, I'm excited because today's the day I discovered Poco Hor. So there's a time in the afternoon, every afternoon, that he's engaged in something. So I'm waiting for that time. When that time happens, let's just be honest. I know who I am and I know how I exist in the world. Fat people can't sneak. Okay, we simply can't sneak. I mean, we're just way too visible. We can creep, however. So I crept over to the window, and I got to the window, and I had my pen, and I was marking things down that were there outside the window and looking for the various cows and so forth. And he looks up from what he's doing, and he sees me at the window, and he leaps up, and he runs to me and stands right beside me and goes, "Poco Hor!" And I'm like, no, this was supposed to be a non-Poco Hor time. So I had to go back to the meeting with the psychologist and say, I don't know. I did the best that I can. I took really good data and so forth, but clearly it was a plan that just simply wasn't going to work. I don't know what Poco Hor means. And he said, "Well, you know, we all knew you were going to fail, but we felt it was important that you try." Well, thank you. I said, "What do I do now?" He said, "You need to do what everybody else in the ward does. Is when you come in and he says Poco Hor, you need to say, 'Philip, you know that doesn't mean anything, and you need to stop it.'" Okay. So that's what I do. I follow through, and I have to tell you, and I'm going to be honest here, I'm a little angry at Philip. He made me look foolish. So I would come in and he'd say Poco Hor. Now he's used to 100% of the time him saying Poco Hor, me coming and standing beside him. But that day was, "Philip, you know that doesn't mean anything, and you have to stop." And I went about my day. And he just looked crushed. Just looked crushed. Well, it wasn't long after that I left. I left my job there, and then the years passed. And I get a phone call. And the phone call is about the fact that the institution where Philip lived is closing. And they want to do something to commemorate this closing. And they said, you know, a lot of times people just leave and they take nothing with them. And what we want to do is create a scrapbook that has pictures of all the parties and things that we've held and the things that we've done over the years, and various staff and various people with disabilities doing various things and so forth, so that they have a book of memories. And what we wanted is for some of the staff and a few of the members, if they are people with disabilities, if they could, just to jot something down. And you know, Dave, you're fairly well known now, and we know you started your career here, so we wondered if you would write something. Like, I'm on your man. I'm your man. I am on this because it seemed important. So I got up very early in the morning. That's what I do. I get up early in mornings and I start work very, very early. Particularly if I need to write something, because I need the quiet and I need the sense of solitude. So I'm sitting at the computer and I haven't yet decided what it is that I wanted to write. I knew that I wanted to tell a story, but what story? There were many stories that I could tell. There were many people who I had experiences with there. But then I remembered Philip, and I remembered Pocahor. And I thought, now there's a story I want to tell. It's a story of a young, naive person coming in to start their career working with people with disabilities, fresh out of school, and with that sense of, I'm going to change the world and so forth. So I thought it was the story of a young man, coming into work. So I sat down and I started to type the story. And as I'm typing the story, I'm forming the images in my head because it's a story for you. It's a memory for me. I can picture his face and I can picture the little mustache that he had here. I can picture his bright blue eyes and I can picture the way that he looked at me with such intensity when he was saying Pocahor. So I'm trying to describe that and capture that in words. Now here's the thing. When I started in that place, I was a boy. I thought I was a man, but I was a boy. I mean, I was fresh out of school. What did I know of life? I mean, literally, what did I know of life? But when I was writing the story, I was a man. And there's a big difference between being a boy and a man. And there's a big difference between being a girl and a woman. There's a huge difference between being a child and an adult because they don't tell us the truth. When we're growing up, we look forward to adulthood as this place of ultimate freedom where we can do what we want and eat what we want and stay up as late as we want and all of these things that signify that we're adults. But nobody ever tells us that adulthood hurts. It hurts. There's disappointment, and there's heartbreak, and there's frustration, and there's dreams that literally die on the vine. I mean, nobody prepares us for that. So I was a boy when I went in there, but I was a man when I was telling the story. And as I was describing what he was doing, I suddenly understood exactly what Pocahor meant, exactly what it meant. Because you see, I knew that Philip existed in the world alone. I knew his family didn't visit. I knew that no one ever called. I knew that no one much ever made him the center of their life. I knew that. And I didn't question that, but I knew that. So Pocahor meant, hey, would you come and stand at the window with me? Would you come and stand with me? Would you make me feel less alone? Would you make me feel less isolated? Can we share some time, just you and me, looking out at the window at this beautiful view? That's what Pocahor meant. He was wanting connection. Living a life of disconnectedness, he wanted connection. And I was his staff. And he was asking for attention from me. And I was giving him that attention, but I very, very quickly and cruelly pulled it away for programmatic reasons. Our job is huge because we work with people whose need for us runs very deep. whose histories are never full of really happy stories. So we go in and we provide service to people with disabilities, and we do the things that we do, and in the way that we do them, people simply feel less alone in their world, because they've got somebody on their side, somebody in their corner. So it matters. It matters what it is we do, and it matters how we do it, and it matters that we work towards community. But there's a problem. And the problem is that damn vote. That damn vote. You know, it's always troubled me that sometimes we do work that is unrecognized. Now, you know what it's like to do work that's unrecognized, and when you don't get thanked, or you don't get reinforced, or you don't get somebody saying something nice to you, or recognizing the quality of the work that you do. But by saying it's unrecognized, I'm saying by ourselves, it goes unrecognized, because miraculous things becomes the stuff of our day. So there was a fellow that I worked with, and he was in the sexuality clinic, and he had done something relatively serious, and he wanted to live on his own in an apartment in the community with limited supervision, and you know, we sort of nodded like, what a good goal, knowing that it would never happen. Well, I worked with him for many years, and after a few years, he said, "Hey, Anya, you know, I've done everything you've asked. I've attended every session. I've done all the homework. I know this stuff. You've seen me demonstrate that I know this stuff and use this stuff. So I want to move." So we panic a little bit and move him to a smaller group home from somewhere that housed about 50. And said, "You're on your way." And then the years pass as they do, and I don't quit, and I'm still working with him, and he's once again anti-up. So he moves to an apartment. And I know about the move. I'd been involved in discussion about where it should be, and the kind of place, and the types of support, and all of that has been dealt with. So I'm in my office one day, and he calls me. And that's not unusual. I have people calling me all the time. So I picked up the phone, and I said hello, and he told me that he was calling me from his new apartment. Now, I know that this is a very big deal, because once again, this is the center of his dream. This is what he wanted. And I'm excited for him. So he invites me to come up and see the apartment. And I start to look at my calendar, and it's like he knows me and knows what I'm doing. So he just simply said, "No." And I said, "What do you mean, no?" He said, "I want you to come up on the weekend." The weekend? And I thought to myself, I don't work the weekend, you know, but he was insistent that I come up on the weekend. So I know what he's doing here. He's trying to invite me up as a friendly visit, not as a clinical visit. And in order to guarantee that, let's do that on a time that isn't scheduled, that isn't paid. So I'm not going to lie to you. I get time and mileage for working Saturday too, and I did charge. So I drove up, and I went into his home, and we sat down, and he had made tea. He knows that I'm a tea drinker, and so I was having a cup of tea and looking around his apartment. And when I finished my tea, I said, "Rob, could you show me your apartment?" And he just sat there, and he pointed, and he said, "Well, there's the bedroom, and there's the bathroom, and there's." And I'm like, no. When people come to visit you for the very first time, they actually want to see where you live. They actually want to see it. So he gets me up, and we walk around the various rooms, and now we're in the kitchen. And I realized something. I worked with this much of him this much of him. I worked towards sexual control. I worked to teach him strategies. That's what I did. It's an important part, but it's only a little part of it. There were other people that worked with him to teach him cooking and to teach him menu planning and to teach him laundry and to teach him all of the various skills that he would need in order to succeed in that place. And now I'm worried. You know, every discussion I ever had about this guy was in regards to what he had done wrong and how do we make sure that doesn't happen again. I didn't ask questions about whether or not he had the skills necessary to live there, but I said to him, so Rob, can I take a look in your fridge? And he's like, yeah. So I opened his fridge and look in there, 4 food groups. I could spot a food group from a mile away. There were 4 food groups, and they were all in the fridge. Okay, so he can get the grocery that he needs. What about menu planning? So I said, so Rob, what are you planning on having for supper? And he looked at me and said, are you going to stay for supper? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to stay for supper, but I want to know what you're going to have. So he opens the freezer and he pulls out a box of fish sticks. He said, I'm going to have fish sticks, and they're the best fish sticks ever. Now, I'd worked with this guy for a long time, and I'd seen those fish sticks before. I'd eaten them with him before. I said, Rob, they're the same fish sticks. They're the same fish sticks you used to have back in the group home, and the same fish sticks you used to have in the big 50-bed place that you lived. The same fish stick. He said, no, they're better. I said, Rob, they're the same. And he said, no, I cook them when I want, I eat them when I want, and they taste better. And I think they probably do. They probably do. I think one of the problems that we have is that we're so used to the taste degree that we don't think about it. We don't think about it. We don't think about what that experience actually feels like and tastes like and smells like and sounds like. These things aren't just words that you put at the bottom of statues. These are words that have a compelling meaning and freedom. And I think the saddest thing about Rob's story is that you know, he's the only one that understood where he was going. He was the only one that understood what the impact would be on his life should he achieve his goal. He was the only one. All of us, and there were many of us, direct support staff, and clinicians and technicians and all sorts of people had worked with him. And we all looked down at what our job was. All looked down at what our job was. Whether that I'm teaching menu planning and there's my task analysis, or I'm teaching this, or I'm teaching that, or whatever it is that I'm doing. We all looked down at what our task was. And we didn't stop at any point and really look up and see what it was we were doing, and see what it was that we were building, and see what it was that we were making possible. We just didn't do that, and that's sad, because we ourselves don't recognize our own achievements. We just don't recognize what it is that we did, and how things are different in somebody's world because of what it was that we did. Let me tell you, I had another really graphic example of that. It was interesting because I was driving across the United States, going from state to state, doing some lecturing, and we had driven very long, and it was probably around 10:30, and Joe and I were both really tired. So we stopped in Toledo, Ohio, and we pulled into a hotel and then went in to register. Or we had called while we were on the road to get a room. So we parked it, got out, and I got in my wheelchair, and luckily they had accessible entrances, so I was able to roll myself in. And I come upon a scene, and it's a direct support professional who's with a guy with a disability. He was so excited to be there, just so excited to be there. And he looked at me when I came in because he wanted me to have the news too, okay? And in very much the style of film, this guy was, this is my first vacation. This is my first vacation. This is my first vacation. And the first thing that crossed my mind was Toledo. But anyways, he was excited about being there in Toledo. And his poor staff, she was trying to get him out of the lobby. But he was there and he was telling people, and they told the clerk over and over, and he told me several times, and then Joe came in with our luggage, and Joe walked straight into the, this is my first vacation. This is my first vacation. So I watched the staff as she just managed to corral him a little bit and bring his level of excitement down a little bit, you know, without ever dousing, and get him off towards his room. And as she was going by, I said to her, how old is he? And she said, 73. 73. And this was his first vacation. This was his first vacation. And he felt that vacation to his bones. He felt that. He was so excited. He couldn't believe it. This had never happened to him before. And by the time you're 73, you begin to believe that what hasn't happened before isn't going to happen now. But here he was on his first vacation. He was really excited. He was in a hotel. He was away. He was on his first vacation. And I wonder if she knew. I mean, I wonder if she saw past the embarrassment that she was feeling, because she was really feeling embarrassed. Not by him or for him, but because of the situation. You know, she just was working so incredibly hard to move him from the lobby to his room. And I wonder if when she got to her room, she just collapsed on the bed and didn't even think so much about what had happened. And I hope she did. I hope she lied down and said, he had his first vacation because of me. Because of me. Because I did this. Because this is part of my job, but I did this. I made this happen. And I'll tell you, that matters. So we're building community, and we've built community, and we're allowing people to have, not allowing people, that's really the wrong word. We're enabling people to experience freedom in a way that really, really, truly matters. And that's wonderful. And that's wonderful. But then there's that damn boat. That damn boat. Tell you one more staff. This is a woman I met in an unusual way. I went to a church in Quebec when I lived there, and I went to an Anglophone church in a Francophone province. And church was both a religious ceremony and a spiritual ceremony, as well as a social opportunity for people who spoke English to get together and just spend some time with one another. So we went every Sunday that we were home. We went. And we went into the hall one day, and I noticed this woman with a disability who wasn't a single trial learner, and had a wee bit of a behavior problem. And she was with her staff in the hall behind the church, and she was stuffing the bulletins. She was taking the filler and putting it in the bulletins and making a new pile. And she was working very hard at that, but she wasn't a single trial learner, and she needed a lot of prompting and needed a lot of help. And sometimes that prompting, that help, brought out the behavior problem. That, anyways. So I just sort of met her by accident. So I went in, I spoke to the minister, and I said, "Who is she? Who is she?" She said, "Oh, that's Judy." And I said, "Who's Judy?" And apparently Judy was a woman with intellectual disability who came to our church every Thursday to stuff the bulletins in order to hand them out. And I said, "I've never seen Judy before, and I've never heard of Judy before. So I'm assuming that I was away traveling when you told the congregation about Judy." And she said, "Oh, I haven't told the congregation." And I said, "You haven't told the congregation? They don't know?" She said, No. And I said, "Why?" She said, "I'm not allowed to." I said, "What do you mean you're not allowed to?" She said, well, I'm told, by the staff that it's confidential." I said, "What's confidential?" She said, "I don't know. Maybe her disability, like." Sometimes I think what we do even sounds just silly. So I said, "I want to know if Judy has ever been invited to church, and if Judy has ever been given the opportunity to be included in any of the church activities." And she said, "No, that's never happened." And I suggest that should happen. Now, my minister at the time, she wasn't a single trial learner, and she learned fairly quickly. And it was the following Sunday we go to church, and Judy's there. Now I go to church early, and the reason I go to church early is that's my pew, that's where I sit. And this may be God's house, but that's my chair, So I always make sure that I'm in the same place. I wasn't in the wheelchair at the time, so I go early to make sure that I've got my territory. And I come in and I see Judy and the staff walking from the back and coming around to where the entrance is to the church. And they were standing there, and the staff had this stack of bulletins that had been folded and had been filled. And Judy was standing at the back of the church, and I don't know that she'd ever been in a church before, or certainly not one like that. And it was a lovely old church, and all the windows had stained glass, and the really cool stained glass from a long time ago. And every bit of light that came into the church was brilliantly colored, and it's just a really pretty church. Well, she's looking around, and she's looking at all the colors and the pews and so forth, and she notices me sitting in my chair, and Joe's not with me because he's in the choir and he's meeting in the back. And so into the church comes the first person arriving. So they had it all planned out. The staff took the bulletin and handed it to Judy and indicated that Judy was to give the bulletin to this fellow. So bulletin is passed over to Judy. Judy gets it in her hands, and you could see it. You could see that there is no way in hell she's given this bulletin over. Her hands just tighten on it. And there's no way, she's not even looking up at, and this poor staff is like prompting. Give the bulletin, 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 give the bulletin. And eventually, after God knows how many requests, Judy shoves the bulletin forward. Now, she doesn't let go of it, but she shoved it forward. So the man takes the bulletin, pulls it out of her hand and says, "Thank you." And those words had such impact on Judy, such impact. She looked shocked. She looked from the man's face, which is one of welcome, and she looks over at the staff like, what the hell just happened? I'm not used to that. I'm not used to that tone of voice. I'm not used to this. So the next person comes in. The staff is now down to just a few props. And again, she shoves it forward, but once again, she doesn't let go of it. So the woman this time, grabs the bulletin and pulls it out of her hand and says, "Thank you." And Judy burst into this beautiful smile. She may not have been a single trial learner, but she knew that twice in a row, people had smiled at her. Twice in a row, people had used a nice voice to say thanks to her. Twice in a row, she was treated decently. Twice in a row, she was treated with respect. Twice in a row, she was treated as if she was a human being. And now people are coming in, and the staff is quickly handing the bulletins over to Judy, and she's now just handing them out. She's no longer trying to hold them, but she's looking at everybody's face to hear the thank you, to be recognized. And it's like she was soaking in all of this warmth that was coming from the people who are arriving. So I'm sitting there, and I'm in church, and I could be forgiven the desire to pray. So I do. I say a prayer. Now, men and women pray differently, and often men will do what's called a bank shot prayer. That's where you take your prayer, you wad it up, you shoot it at the bottom of heaven, and you hope it bounces down and hits whoever you've aimed at. So I do a bank shot prayer. I'm aiming at the staff. Give the bulletins to Judy. Just give the bulletins to Judy. Give the bulletins to Judy. So I wad that up and I shoot it up at the bottom of heaven, and it comes down, and I miss the staff, but hits Judy, who grabs the bulletins. Now she's got the bulletins, and she has taken them with some force from the hands of the staff. But you know what that staff did? She recognized what was going on. She put it in the context of what happened over the last little bit. So instead of causing any kind of problem at all, or instead of seeing Judy as a problem, she stepped away. She just backed up and left Judy alone at the back of the church, with her a few feet away behind her. Judy was now grabbing the bulletins and independently handing them to people as they came in. And she did it on her own, and she was so happy. Well, not only did she hand out the bulletins, she stayed for church. And she sat in the church. And she followed what everybody else did, stood when people stood and sat when people sat, and all that. But it was really interesting because every time the minister picked up the bulletin to say something about the bulletin, Judy smiled. She knew she had made a contribution. She knew she had made a contribution. And the following Easter, Judy became a member of the congregation. So a single staff at the back of a room read it right, understood the context of the life that Judy was living, understood that she was a woman who was valued by very few, and understood that she was a woman who was taking in this acceptance for the first time. It must have been like watching a child eat their very first cookie. That kind of absolute pleasure in that acceptance and that sense of welcome and warmth. So she did that for Judy. She did that for Judy. And Judy was changed by that. So again, pre-pandemic, we did a lot. We did a lot. We've taken a people who lived in exile, and we've made community possible. We've allowed people, not allowed people, I need to stop that kind of language. We've enabled people to feel freedom, and we've made it possible for people to feel inclusion, to feel a part of something, to be a part of something. We did all that. We did all that. But then there's that damn boat. So let's talk about this boat. We are in the times of COVID. We are in the times of a pandemic. And whenever this kind of thing happens, there comes to be a societal evaluation of who is worthy and who is not, whose deaths matter and whose deaths don't, whose lives should be saved and whose lives should be allowed to simply go away. And you know, right at the very beginning of the pandemic, that discussion happened up here in Canada as people started to talk about the resources and worry about the resources and worry about hospitals being flooded and who's coming in and who should be given medical care and who shouldn't be given medical care. My own country, that stuff happened. But in the United States, I'm reading that as hospitals are filling up, there's panels of people who look at who's asking for service, and they help determine who gets it, who doesn't. Well, you have to understand that when you have a disability, that's always you. It's always you. There is this assumption that disability has no value, that disability gives nothing, that disability just takes from the larger society. And you know, we start indoctrinating people in this really ugly idea very young, very young. In our school system, we have ethics questions, which are meant to subtly teach people to value people differently. That damn boat. I don't know how many of you had this in your ethics class, but it's commonly taught. And if it's not a boat, it's something else. So the one that I know is that there's this boat, and there's 5 people in the boat, and there's a young mother, there's a child, there's a young man, there's maybe his wife, I don't remember, and there's a person in a wheelchair, and there's only room on the boat for 4. So who gets to stay on the boat and who gets thrown out? And this is set up to be a discussion like there's ever any possibility that anybody would choose anybody else. Anybody else. You're never going to hear young mom. You're never going to hear young boy. You're never going to hear young healthy man. You're never going to hear that. You're going to hear disabled person. Disabled person. Throw them out. Throw them out. Throw them out. You're never ever going to hear somebody with a disability being chosen. No, you don't know. You don't know who's in that boat. You just have these vague descriptions of them. One of those people in the boat could be Hitler, and the other could be Stephen Hawking, for God's sakes, because nobody ever thinks of that. They only think of able-bodied is something of value, and disability is something that is not valued. That damn boat. And here, you guys are coming to work. You guys are coming to work. Right now, you're coming to work. There's a pandemic on, and you're coming to work. You need to understand what that means. Now, I know it means inconvenience, and I know it means masks, and I know it means PPEs, and all of those things. I know that. But you're coming to work. You're showing up by your very behavior. You are saying, I'm taking care of someone in the boat. I'm taking care of somebody of value. I'm taking care of someone who needs me and who needs support, but is somebody who's worthy of my time, somebody who is worthy of my effort, somebody who is worthy of me getting up and going into a place where I place myself at risk. You're doing that at a time when it really matters, at a time when people will see what it is that you're doing and will question what you're doing and will not understand what you're doing and will not understand the decisions that you make, but you're doing them. You're doing them. You're going in, and by your very action, you are calling out the lie that disability has no worth, that people with intellectual disabilities have no value. You're calling out the lie. And for me, as somebody who's in a wheelchair, as somebody who I know, if I was on any boat, anywhere, I'd be the first tossed off. I know that any hospital board that had to look at allocating resources would read about fat man in wheelchair and I'm done, I'm toast, I'm not served. I know that. So this is, from me, a disabled person speaking to you, somebody who supports people with disabilities. It matters to me. It matters to me at a really deep level that you do what you do. And it matters to me that people understand that the reason you do it is, yeah, it's your job. Yeah, you got paid. Yeah, you're supporting your family. Yeah, you're doing those things. But I haven't met a single DSP that doesn't talk with absolute pride about the people that it is that they serve. They're telling news stories about who people with disabilities are and why they matter and why they matter to them. So I know going to be aired during DSP recognition week, and I know that you know you're looking at the promises happening out of the hero rhetoric. Well, I can't do that for you. I simply can't. But I can say that it matters. That it matters you do what you do because you're part of a civil liberties movement and you're not immediately turning your back on people who are deemed to be not worthy. You're not doing that. And for that decision that you make to come to work and support people who others don't value, who others don't see their worth, who others would just let them die. Thank you.
So Dave, thank you. I'm sorry. Sorry. Thank you. That affected me. Even though I recorded it with you a couple weeks ago, watching it again and listening again. Thank you. And now,
Caught
as
myself by surprise. I cried at the end.
oh man. So that said, let's buck up here. Um, Hi Joe, I hear you in the background. Hi Joe. So Dave and participants, we have Dave for a few minutes. If you have any pertinent burning questions, if you want to put them in the question box, that'd be great. It was funny. People were wondering about what the damn boat was. Boy, were they in suspense, right, Dave?
That was my hope. But I saw that somebody thought I said book, not boat. And I think that's my Canadian accent, you know.
Great. So yeah, I'm seeing some things here. Some people were crying. The Santa story got people crying. Any questions? If you want to pop a question in that question box, that'd be great. Dave, I don't know if you have any couple final words to wrap this up before we wrap this all up. That'd be great.
You know, I guess as I listen to that again, and I think about the situation that we're all in, it really strikes me the history that we've had in service to people with disabilities and the remarkable things that have been done. You know, there was a researcher down in the United States who was looking at civil liberties movements, and his assessment was that the community living movement for people with disabilities was the most successful that had ever been, because people who one day were idiots and morons and the next day were neighbors and friends. And you know, you talk about those things as abstract things, but people did that work. You know, that people made that happen. It wasn't something that was magical. It wasn't something done by an agency. It wasn't something that was done by anybody other than those who actually walked people from the margin to the center, you know, and that's a hell of a march, you know, and I think we need to stop every now and then and be really proud of where we are and what we do and so forth.
Beautiful. Here's a question. What advice would you give to young adults looking for opportunities to build a career supporting people with disabilities?
That's hard, because I'd like to think about it, but I think the first thing that crossed my mind is that, you know, if you're going into work with people, you have to remember that you're working with people. You know, that you're going in to a job that requires the understanding of relationship and the understanding of gentleness and the understanding of care, that you're entering into a commitment as much as you're entering into a profession. And I think that that's something that has always been there for me, you know, because even though I progressed in my career through different positions, I have always refused to be in a position where I didn't work with people with disabilities directly. Now, mostly what I do now is abuse prevention training or sex education or bullying awareness and so forth for people with disabilities, but it still puts me into contact with people with disabilities because I think that's what we're here for, that commitment to relationship and that commitment to the people that we serve. And, you know, when I retired, I think one of the most moving things that happened was I got to my desk and there was, my phone message light was blinking, which is really unusual because my phone message essentially says, "Don't leave a message." You know, here's other ways of contacting me because I'm often not in the office. So when I got to the machine, there's this fellow whose voice I recognized immediately. Now, when I met this guy, he was in real difficult straits. He was having a really tough time in his life. He didn't trust anyone. He didn't believe that anybody was there for him. He felt entirely and completely alone in the world, and he wouldn't let people in. And it was very, very difficult to work with him. And that was years ago. And here he's on the phone to me, and he said, Dave, I heard you're retiring, and I wanted to wish you well. And I was like, that man who called me was not the man who I met. Do you know what I mean? His journey had brought him to the point that he could actually think about somebody else, care about somebody else, express that caring, and so forth. And once again, it doesn't happen by magic. It happens because people worked with him through that. People taught him trust, and people taught him care, and people taught him that he was a person of value and that he had something of value to give. Because that call to me was not only for me, it was from him who valued himself enough to think that his wishes would mean something to me. You know, so.
We have time for one more question, and then we have to wrap up. And here's the one. This is a good one. Does this put you on your wizard cap and get your crystal ball out? So Dave, where do you want to see direct support professionals in the next 25 years? It's a good question. Where would you like to see direct support professionals?
Well, if I had a wish, you know, that would come true, I would like to see direct support professionals recognized for the work that they do and paid for what they're worth. You know, everybody talks about people being heroes, but people want heroes to live on the crumbs of the wealthy, and that disturbs me a little bit, and it always has. You know, our profession is not well paid, and I know that's separate from what you may be asking me, but in terms of direct support professionals, I don't really want them to do anything differently than what they're doing now. I mean, the philosophies will change and the approaches will change and so forth, and direct support persons will adapt to that. But what we need is a society that adapts to understand. I think the reason people who support people with disabilities are not paid well is because people with disabilities are not valued well. And I think that that those two things go hand in hand. So the more people with disabilities get valued, the more people will be compensated for what they do. So.
Great. Once again, Dave Hingsburger, thank you, obviously, for all you do. And hey, we're working on Monday the 21st. Dave and I will be doing a webinar. Let's talk with Dave. It's going to be great. And just if you want to learn more about it, just go on our website. You'll see our Facebook posts. Tune in. It's free. It's really good. Don't miss it. What's the name of it again, Dave?
I don't know.
Good. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be awesome.
It's a good one. That's the title. This is a good one.
Where do my whatever? It's going to be good. I'm sorry. I'm all emotional from your darn keynote, Dave. Thanks a lot, buddy. Anyway, that said, again, thank you, Dave. Thank you.
And thank you all the folks who made comments on the side. I felt really dumb. I think 20 minutes in, I was responding to every single person that had said something nice, but I was sending it to you guys and not to the people who were actually writing that. So I apologize to you. I did do it, but I was sending it to the wrong place. This is all new to me.
All good.
So,
this is a group of direct support professionals and the most forgiving human beings on the planet. So don't worry about that. but thank you. We have to thank IARF, the Illinois Association of Rehabilitation Facilities, for sponsoring this session. Thank you, IARF. We appreciate you. Please tune in tomorrow for our final day of our From Praise to Promise Summit. There's going to be an award ceremony for a very important person. There's going to be a keynote from our Chief Executive Officer, our President, CEO, Joseph Macbeth. He's going to talk about what this promise thing is. You're all wondering what the boat was. Well, we're going to talk about what the promise is, from praise to promise. Well, Joe's going to talk about that tomorrow. Please tune in for that. And we're going to have a final big, huge, giant thank you to all direct support professionals in North America with a very special video presentation. So don't miss that. We're going to have more gift cards that we're going to be giving out. And so that's our final bit of business today. Let's do this. We have 2 gift cards worth $100 a piece. And they were sponsored by, and thanks to the generosity of, Lutheran Social Services of Minnesota. Thank you so much. And the Iowa Association of Community Providers each have contributed a $100 gift card for 2 lucky direct support professionals. And here we go. Drum roll. Where's the names? Here they are. Peggy Burton. Peggy Burton from Scioto Residential Services in Ohio. Congratulations, you've won a $100 gift card. You'll get an email with how to redeem that. That's really cool. And then our second winner today, congratulations to Catherine Bennett from Beach Island, South Carolina. And Catherine is a direct support professional at Georgia Mentor, the Georgia Mentor Network, I believe. So congratulations to Peggy and Catherine. You know, use it on whatever. Just buy something silly with it. Just go for it. Just go for it. Buy something frivolous, or I guess maybe get gas. I don't know. It's your $100, so you take it and go with it.
Maybe what you could do is buy something that's wonderful and fulfilling, like pie, and you can also get gas.
Well, you get gas from the pie, depending
I know,
on the pie.
that's my point.
Okay, there you go. Oh, Dave.
Okay.
Hey, Dave. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
See you
everybody.